Good morning. Go ahead and stand up. Hey, happy Father's Day to the dads out there. We're going to have some fun today. Put your hands together. From urban streets to open plains, we are under one name. No one is lost or goes unseen, 'cause we are loved by our King. Yeah. Oh, this is nothing ordinary. No, there is power in the name we carry. Yeah, every nation, every tongue. Welcome to the kingdom. Come on. All the rich, all the poor, all the people, we're all yours. Yes, we are daughters, we are sons. More and more loves, we are royals. We are yours. We are yours. Yeah, yours. We are yours. Our hearts are loud, we're running free with different stories, but one dream. And we don't wonder if we belong. We found our home in the Father's love. Oh, this is nothing ordinary. There is power in the name we carry. Yeah. Oh, every nation, every tongue. You are welcome to the kingdom. Come on. All the rich, all the poor, all the people, we are yours. Yes, we are daughters, we are sons. More than mortals, we are royals. We are yours. We are yours. Yeah, yours. We are yours. It don't matter where we come from. Everyone is welcome in your kingdom. It don't matter if we're broke or we're broken. In your love we have found our freedom. All the rich, all the poor, all the people, we are yours. Yes, we are daughters, we are sons. More than mortals, we are royals. We are yours. We are yours. Yeah, yours. We are yours. Yes, we are yours.
Good morning, good morning. How are you guys doing this morning? Awesome. Hey, my name's Paul. I'm one of the pastors here on staff. Do we have any dads in the room? Any dads in the room? Awesome. I thought I heard a girl say, whoo. It's like, whoa. Happy Father's Day. Hope you enjoyed a donut, maybe taking a look at some of those cars out there. Big thanks to East Valley Cruisers for bringing all those cars out for us. Yeah, super cool. I know nothing about cars. I'm like, so that's the motor. Cool, awesome. Hey, so we were thinking this last week about Father's Day, how we could celebrate you dads here. What's the greatest gift we could give you? And the greatest gift we could give you, we thought, would be some advice. And so we thought of the most beloved father in all of American history. Danny Tanner was unavailable for this morning, so you got me instead. Credentials, been married almost 12 years here in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much. We've got 3 kids, 5, 3, and 2. In dad years, that's like 70 kids, or 70 years, something like that. So, I've got some years under my belt here. But I thought of 3 things real quick. 3 things that, just some advice, some tips for you guys, you dads out there. First one being, never take a toddler's word for it. Did that the other day, ended up spanking myself. Don't know how it happened. Don't even know how I did it. Don't take a toddler's word for it. Number 2, Sharpies. Sharpies are not proper writing utensils for anyone. Whoever came up with permanent markers, I don't know. Whoever needs a marker to be permanent? No one ever, okay? Number 3 would be this. Dad bod shaming is real, okay? Don't let anybody dad bod shame you. Your body shape is beautiful, okay? Your body shape is beautiful. Flaunt it, okay? There's your advice for this morning. Thank you. In all seriousness, the best piece of advice I could give you dads today is do your best work at home. Today we celebrate being dads. It's one of the greatest callings that we have in our life. Do your best work at home. We love you, dads. Thank you so much for all that you do in our lives. Happy Father's Day. We've got a great service planned for you guys. So yeah, we can clap for dad or me. Thank you for that. Happy Father's Day. But we've got a great service for you guys today. Chris, Yvonne, and the band, they're going to lead us in some more songs in just a little bit. You're going to hear a little bit more about this backpack drive that we introduced last year. We talked a little bit about last week. But Joel Thomas, our lead pastor, he's going to come out here, and he's going to continue in our series, Road Trip. But before we go any further, turn to somebody around you, say hello, give your dad a big hug, and we're going to get going here in just a minute.
chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Come on, sing that out. I am chosen, yeah, not forsaken. Oh, I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am.
I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. The sun sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. My Father's house is a place for me. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won. For you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet.
we're going to continue this morning with our worship by giving back to that God that never fails us, that we just sang about, that over and over through time and time again we see working in and through our lives. So this time you can go ahead and grab a seat. Our volunteers are going to come forward. We're going to give those gifts. But like I said, we're going to continue. Yvonne's going to lead us in a song in just a moment here. But as today's Father's Day, we recognize that for some of us, this is a day of celebrating, a day of joy, a day of honoring our dads. Some of you, like me, grew up with a really great dad. And my dad was really great, and it's awesome on Father's Day to celebrate him. But for some of you, that's not the case. And for some of you, your dad figure looks different. Maybe it was a grandparent. Maybe it was a stepfather. Maybe it was somebody else that just assumed that role for you. And today you get to celebrate them. And that's awesome. But for some of you, you don't even know what a dad figure looks like. See, maybe your dad wasn't a good dad while you grew up. Or maybe he was just not there at all. And so a day like today just seems not as great. Maybe it's painful. Maybe you hurt on days like today. Maybe a day like today is a day that you just don't scroll through social media because you don't want to see everybody posting about how great their dad is when you know that your dad never existed for you. And I want to tell you that whichever one of those stages that you fit in, that we call God the Father, and he calls himself that. And maybe you didn't have a dad growing up, or maybe your dad wasn't a good dad growing up. And so your example of what that father figure looks like wasn't awesome. But God the Father sent Jesus to die in your place. And not just so that one day you would spend eternity with him in heaven, but so that right now that you would know that you are truly loved and cherished and cared for. And so that I hope that in a day like today, with mixed emotions, that we would all look to our Father in heaven as our example of what a great dad looks like. And today we would celebrate God the Father as all of our Father, because he calls each and every one of us, no matter where we are, what stage of life we're going through, he calls us his children. So let's continue to sing together and lift up God the Father.
Before he spoke creation, the God of heaven knew our names. And formed in his reflection, we are his glory on display. And his heart is good, he is always kind. With the cross he proved he is on our side. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. Though we stumble, he will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and he will never forsake his own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. The love he lavished on us, he calls us children of the King.
Well, happy Father's Day again to all of my paternal warriors. Are you with me? My fellow paternal warriors. We have to stick together. It's an important thing in the fight against tyranny in our household. So we rise up and stand together today. Happy Father's Day. Before we jump in to our series, continue our series, I want to tell you about something really fun. By the way, if you're new or if you've been around and you're looking to get connected, so a lot of our groups and stuff ramp down this summer. We do have a couple of groups that are meeting, but a lot of our groups take off in the summer. We're introducing a bunch of new groups starting in August. Information is coming on that soon. Some new studies and some new groups I'm really excited about, along with some new initiatives. But we're also hosting an event this fall that I'm just super excited about, and I think we're really privileged to have my former boss and a great friend of mine, Andy Stanley, who's written several books, pastors a church in Atlanta. He wrote a book called Irresistible, and he's been doing, traveling around, investing in church leaders and other folks, and it's not really a book about theology, it's not really a book about, church, it's really a book about what it is to be a Christian in this day and age. And if you're somebody who cares at all about the future of the church, the faith of the next generation, and you're interested in how do you talk about your faith in a world where much of our faith is under attack, and or how do you secure and invest in the next generation in a way that they'll have a lasting faith, this is for you. We're actually just hosting the event. It's happening here on September the 19th. Andy's gonna be here live, which I'm thrilled about. He's gonna be here and as well as some other folks, and they're gonna be doing an event. It's really, there's church leaders gonna come from all over the Southeast to come, but the reason I'm telling you about it is because I don't want you to miss out. Likely this event's gonna sell out. So if you'd like to come, it's an all-day event. If you go to you can go to the website, irresistiblettour.com, or you can link to it from our website or social media pages. You can find out more information about that. Also, if you're really interested or know somebody who might be, there's some these brochures that specifically tell you about each of the sessions, what the day is going to be like. They are not for sale. They're for free. You can grab one on your way out at the hub. So I just want to let you know about that. It's coming this fall, as well as a lot of other things that I'm really excited about. Now, I have to get one thing out of the way, especially because it's Father's Day, because I got in trouble with one of my fellow father friends last week. This series is not an argument for the fact that dads should love road trips, okay? I got in trouble because a good friend of ours, his wife has been, I didn't know this, but behind the scenes, she's been wanting to do a road trip this summer and then wanting to do it for a while, and they've got little kids, and his greatest life fear is being trapped in the car with multiple little kids for long periods of time. And 2 weeks ago, they showed up, and she's been talking about, we need to take a road trip. We need to go do something fun this summer. And he's like, no, we're not doing that. We're not road trip people. We fly places. We don't drive places. And they show up at church, and we're doing a series called Road Trip. And he's like, she elbowed me the entire service. Like, this is what we're supposed to be doing. So this isn't an argument for the fact that you should love road trips, but we do in my family. And we're looking at some famous roads in the scriptures. I will say the one reason is because road trips can be dangerous. When we first moved here from Georgia, we came here, and as many of you know, like within 6 hours of here, there's just world-class places to visit. And so we were making our first trip to California from here, driving to California. We're gonna take the 10, go up over the mountains and go to the LA area and go to the beach and explore around, because we love to explore and take road trips. What we did not realize is there was a stretch in there where there is literally no gas stations where you have to get gas. Anybody know this? Learn this? You all know this. You learn. None of you were my friends at the time, I guess. So we're on our way, and I don't know if this is still the case, but Apple Maps lies. They sit on a throne of lies, by the way. And I saw that there was a gas station just before you head up the hill to Chiriaco, is that how you say that? Chiriaco Summit? Anybody know this? Did I say it right? Chiraco. It's just Chiraco. Chiraco Summit. So you're going up the hill, and Chiraco Summit, if you probably know it because it's the famous General Patton Museum is right there, which makes a ton of sense. But it's this random place, but before that, down at the bottom of the mountain, before you go up the mountain, there's a desolate place where there used to be gas stations that Apple Maps still thought there was gas stations, and I think being the master navigator that I am, this is gonna time out perfect. We're gonna pull into this area at just the right amount of gas, we'll get gas, and then we'll be good to go all the way the rest of the way. So we pull off the exit, and we're 3 miles till empty. It is perfect. Like, I'm getting, full advantage of the full gas station. We're going as far as we can. Some of you play that game. So maybe very few of you play that game. You're about to find out why. So We pull off the exit, and I look to the right, and I look to the left, and literally it's abandoned. Everything's abandoned. Every building's abandoned. There's just like a gas station, the what used to be of a gas station left with the awning, and the only refuge we could find is we pull in there. I forgot to mention that my wife was 6 months pregnant, that I had 2 kids in the car, and it's 147 degrees outside because it's July. So we pull in there, and I'm thinking, my wife's upset, of course, she should be, and I'm going, but maps said there was gas here. Like, I'm going to the gas station, and so we pull in there, and there's, of course, nobody around, so we're sitting there, and we see a car starting to pull over near us, gets off the exit, and they pull over, and they must have seen the same thing we did, but they had enough gas, so they got back on the highway and kept going. And then another car came and pulled through that little area, and I got out of the car like to walk over to like be like, hey, you want to come over and like see how we're doing, you know? And no, they just kept going and took off and left. Finally, this guy in a truck, it was a work truck with some big machine on the back of it, pulls in, and he pulls in right next to us. And I'm like, this is awesome. This guy's gonna help us. He gets out, he's on the phone. He's talking about how the water pump in his truck's broken and he needs a tow truck to come get him. I'm like, this guy's not gonna help us. Like, we got no help. So we're talking, we strike up a conversation. He's like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, well, here's the deal. And I thought this, and he just starts laughing like, everybody knows this. How do you not know that there's not gas in this stretch of road? And so we're having a conversation. He goes, hey, I actually might be able to help you. And I was like, oh, really? He's like, yeah, this big machine on the back is a welding machine, and it takes regular gas. And he's like, if you got a hose, we can siphon the gas out and put it into your car. To which I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I don't have a hose. Like, that's not really gonna help me at this point. He's like, you know, let me see what I got in my work truck. So he goes over his work truck and he pulls out this brand new hose with like these nice couplings on the end. He's like, I got this. He's like, I guess we could use this. He opens a package, takes his knife, cuts off both ends of this brand new hose. And he's like, have you ever siphoned gas before? I'm like, no, I've never siphoned gas before. And he's like, all right. So he puts the hose in one side, you know, and he's like you know, like spitting out all the gas. Like once it starts coming, and he's gotta be thinking, who is this moron? Like, just my luck, my truck breaks down, I pull in next to this guy, and so he's being really kind, and so the gas starts flowing, and it's going in there, and so I go around the other side of the car, I get in the car, I said to my wife, I was like, I had some cash in my wallet. I'm like, how much cash do you have? I'm like, we're gonna give this guy every bit of cash we have. Like we don't carry a lot of cash, but like we had almost $200, and I'm like, it's worth it. Like this guy's saving our lives, he's getting us enough gas. So I get the cash, and you know, we get over there, and I'm talking to him, and he's telling me about a house he's building. He's a welder, he's doing some work on this big house in California. He's trying to get out there. So finally, we get about enough gas. He's having me watch the gauge. So we got enough gas, and he's pulling out. I finally figured, I was like, so where are you from? And he's like, he literally is like almost my neighbor. Like he lives right by me down here in Gilbert, to which now I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna be the guy that I'm in the grocery store and I see him, he's gonna be like, Dad, that's that guy, or the moron guy. That's the guy I was telling you about. And this is terrible. And so I was like, listen, here, just take this cash. You know, I'm so grateful. He wouldn't take it. He's like, he wouldn't take any money from me. I'm like, come on. I'm like, at least take the money for the hose. Like, there's gotta be money for the gas. Like, let me compensate. And he's like, no. He's like, you did the same thing for somebody else. And I was like, no, I don't have a machine on the back of my truck. And I don't carry hoses. I don't know how to siphon gas. Like, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't do that for somebody else because I don't know how to do that for somebody else. And here's the point of the whole story, because there actually is a point, believe it or not, other than that I'm a moron. The reality is he treated me like a neighbor before he even knew I was his neighbor. And Jesus told an amazing story we're gonna look at today. It's a very famous story about this same sort of thing. And Jesus told the story about somebody who 2 other people passed by, and then somebody actually stopped and helped. But there's a backstory to the story. And I think the backstory is as important or more important because I think this story is misapplied all the time. If you have a Bible or a device and you want to open up to Luke chapter 10, I would love for you to follow us around. I'm gonna kind of teach and talk through this whole story, but I want to give you the backstory, the lead up to it, because just before Jesus tells this story, something really important happens. And if you don't understand the discourse before the story, you miss the point of the story and even the personal application of the whole story. This is how he begins. Luke chapter 10, beginning of verse 25. Luke quotes sort of what happened in this way. He said, one day an expert in religious law stood up to test Jesus. This happened regularly. Teachers of the law, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, they were always trying to test Jesus because he was sort of pulling away from their authority and their attention, and oftentimes was critical of them. He stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question: Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life? Which is a normal question you would ask a religious leader or a holy person. So he's asking Jesus this question, but remember, it's a test. And Jesus actually knew it was a test because he was Jesus. And Jesus knew that actually this wasn't the real question because the expert knew the answer to that question. There was a question behind the question. So instead of answering, Jesus replied this way. He did what really mature and smart and wise people do. He answers the question with a question. He says, well, what does the law of Moses say? How do you read it? You're the expert of the law. You teach people about these things all the time. What would you say the answer to your question is? And the expert in the law I don't think was expecting that, so he gave the answer that any Jewish person would give. And if you were there and you were part of the Jewish audience, this is something you'd heard your whole life. It comes out of Deuteronomy chapter 6. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, they're instructed to teach this idea or this thing first to all of your children. Fathers and mothers are instructed to teach their kids when they wake up in the morning and all along the road throughout their day and as they crawl into bed at night. This is something you should remind them over and over and over. And the expert of the law, he answered, he said this, that you must love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your strength and with all of your mind. Meaning, with everything you've got every day, the first and foremost thing that's of most importance in your life is to love God with everything you are, whatever that looks like. And then, here's what's so interesting. The expert in the law had been paying attention. He would have never put this second thing he's gonna say with this, except he's been listening to Jesus' teaching. If you were to flip earlier, Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he answered with the same thing from Deuteronomy 6. But then he quoted something from Leviticus chapter 19. In Leviticus chapter 19, he connects these two ideas which have never been connected before Jesus connected them. This Deuteronomy 6 idea and this Leviticus 19 idea. He put these two things together, and this expert of the law knew. And he knew, and it was actually part of what his question was behind the question. So he answered, but he answered based on this teaching in Leviticus. And in Leviticus 19, it says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So neighbor in the Old Testament, according to the law, according to Moses, because what he was really trying to do is pit Jesus against Moses. Because if he could pit Jesus against Moses, he would lose the crowd because nobody challenged Moses. Moses was, and I've done this before, Moses, Charlton Heston, like 10 Commandments, part the Red Sea, like you didn't battle the words of Moses. And he's trying to put Jesus against Moses so he can discredit him. And so he harkens back to this teaching, which is kind of the point of his challenge of Jesus, is that neighbor was defined in the Old Testament, in the law, as among your people. So a Jew's neighbor was a fellow Jew. And since Jesus had coupled these two things together, which this expert of the law wouldn't have done before, but he said, hey, Deuteronomy 6 says this, to love the Lord your God with all of your heart and soul and mind and strength. Can we go back to the other scripture there? To all your heart and soul and strength and mind. And because he'd been paying attention, because he knew Jesus' teaching, because he knew what Jesus said was the greatest command, he said, and, I remember Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus' response to that was not at all what he was expecting. Jesus went, right. Jesus told him, right, that's it. Do this and you'll live. To which the expert in the law is going, that's not the whole story. And like, you didn't take my bait, you didn't listen to my question, and this is not going well. And even when I read it, I go, wait, Jesus, that's confusing. Like, you've taught more than that. That's not as simple as it was. But here's the thing. Jesus knew what the lawyer was up to. He knew this expert in the law was trying to put Jesus on trial and attempting to trap Jesus into clarifying something that would further pit him against the law of Moses. Jesus had previously taught in his famous Sermon on the Mount that you should love your enemies and do good to those who persecute you. Well, in the Old Testament, in the law, they were told not to intermix with people who were not like them, who were non-Jewish people. They weren't to intermarry with people who weren't Jewish people. They weren't to associate with people. They were to remain clean and they were to remain holy. And Jesus says, love your enemies was code for like non-Jews. And he's like, okay, this may go in the right direction. Let's take it from a different angle. And not only that, just one other thing that's going on. The reputation of the experts of the law and the religious leaders, the Pharisees, was that they didn't love their neighbors, their fellow Jews anyway, let alone their enemies. And so this lawyer, this is what he's trying to get at. And Jesus sort of steps in and he says, no, this is what you're supposed to do. You do this and you live. And the man, he wanted to justify his actions. He wanted to justify himself. He wanted to justify his position. He wanted to justify his teaching. So he asked Jesus, okay, Jesus, so who is my neighbor? If I'm supposed to love the Lord my God, all my heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love my neighbor as myself, define that for me. Could you clearly define what neighbor means? And Jesus was expecting this, and this time he didn't answer the question. He answered with a story. Jesus replied with a story, which of course he did, because he's so brilliant. And this is the story you've heard over and over and over. But that backdrop is so important, because it's the backdrop of the greatest commandment, this idea of loving God and loving others, that puts this story into context. This is the famous story of the Good Samaritan. Does anybody know the road, by the way, that the Good Samaritan took place on? The story of the Good Samaritan? Anybody? The Jericho Road. It's the Jericho Road. Here's how we find out. And by the way, this is, I'll show you this real quick. This is a picture first. So this is the Jericho Road, which most of us, I don't know what you picture when you think of the Good Samaritan, but this is the path. And you can barely see this, but there's a really small path. This Jericho Road was nothing more than a path, a walking path that was maybe 6 feet wide. And it went from Jerusalem down to Jericho, which is over about 17 miles. It's sort of like hiking down into the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's 17 miles, about 3,500 feet down into to Jericho from Jerusalem. And the thing is this pathway is just maybe 6 or 8, couple meters wide. And it drops off. If you look at this, it drops off on one side by a few hundred feet. Now, it's hard to tell in this, but like if you see this dot right here, this is actually a pack of 6 people. If you were to zoom in on this picture, they're smaller than my fingernail. So you can see on that path how far it drops down. And actually, just to connect with last week, this valley right here, this was called the Wadi Kelt, which means valley of the shadow of death. This was the valley of the shadow of death that they referred to. So this path, this trip from Jerusalem to Jericho was notorious for being treacherous. It was extremely dangerous. And Jesus starts with a story about a man traveling on that path. He says this. He says, a Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, and you would say, and you and I would say, hopefully by good chance, not so much in this story, but by chance, a priest came along. When he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed by him. Now, if you were walking from Jerusalem down to Jericho, you would walk on the side of the road that was furthest away from the drop-off for obvious reasons. Because something could happen, you could lose your footing, you could slip off, and you fall hundreds of feet to your death. It was known as the Valley of the Shadow of Death for a reason. So you would walk on the high side. So basically, Jesus is insinuating that he's walking here, and he literally walked closer to danger to pass by around this man, the priest. And then a temple assistant, otherwise known as a Levite, somebody who worked in the temple, who did God's work as well. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the more dangerous other side. Now, if Jesus had paused too long here, the expert in the law would have interjected. And he would have interjected and he would have said, hey, by the way, real quick, there's a good reason for that, Jesus, and you know it. You're leaving it out of your story on purpose. If we go back to Leviticus, in Leviticus chapter 21, just a few chapters over, you know that priests and Levites are instructed to remain clean. And they're not supposed to associate with anything that's dead or dying or half dead because it's unclean. And in order to remain clean before the Lord and to enter the temple, they have to remain clean. So Jesus, I mean, you know this. They're avoiding this thing that's dead or even half dead because they're priests or they're Levites. But Jesus didn't take a breath. Maybe the expert in the law tried to interject, but Jesus said, then, Then a despised Samaritan. I'll come back to you. You can interject in just a second. Just keep listening. Then a despised Samaritan came along, which had so much emotion involved in it. We can't even appreciate this. Like, Jews and Samaritans hated each other. And in fact, Jesus' audience, his audience there, they would have assumed the Samaritan or the bandit that accosted this man was a Samaritan. And even if he wasn't, they would have started telling everybody that this guy was accosted by a Samaritan, because that's how they felt about Samaritans. And so he hears this and he thinks, surely Jesus isn't gonna make, I'll listen, surely Jesus isn't gonna make the Samaritan the hero of the story. And by the way, if he does, that's actually pretty good. Because if Jesus makes the Samaritan the hero, he's gonna lose his entire Jewish audience. They're all gonna be against him. Okay, Jesus, you go ahead. Tell us about the Samaritan. What did the Samaritan do in this situation? Because he knew Samaritans too also believed that somebody who was dead or half dead, they were also unclean. And Jews, Samaritans, even more than the average Jews, would not touch or would not associate with somebody who was dead or half dead, let alone a Jewish person that was dead or half dead. It's not gonna happen. Jesus said, then a despised Samaritan came along. And when he saw the man, he felt blank for him. Now, some of you know what's in the blank, but before we jump to what's in the blank, here's the truth. The truth of what would come next was based on the reality of what was really in the blank for the Samaritan man. I don't know what you think that word is or what you think the word should be, but Jesus' Jewish audience, if they were having to fill in the blank, they wouldn't have filled in the blank with the word he was gonna fill the blank in with. But before we get to that, what about the priest and the Levite? Like, what were they feeling? I mean, they saw the same man. Why didn't they feel the same thing the Samaritan felt? Now, a generous explanation might have been because they felt fear. They were afraid of what was going on. Maybe the bandits were close by, and if they stopped, they knew they're gonna experience certain doom. Just like this guy, they were gonna get robbed, and they shouldn't stop because this was a dangerous stretch of road, and they should just keep going. So maybe it was their fear. Maybe they were conflicted. Maybe they wanted to help. I mean, the Levite went over and he actually looked and inspected. Maybe he thought, you know what, I wanna help, but I don't have any expertise. I don't know how to help this guy. I don't think I can actually do anything for this guy. Maybe he felt powerless. I think all of those, I oftentimes try before judging people to think, what's the most generous explanation of the situation? And maybe that was one of those were true. But I think it's more likely and even more relatable for most of us in the 21st century that they felt nothing when they walked by this man. Now, here's why I say that. It's because oftentimes when we see people who are in need or we see somebody who's in distress, we don't feel anything towards them. And sometimes it's because we're too busy. We got a lot going on. We're trying to get somewhere and we're just trying to get around the mess that's going on or the accident that happened. We're just trying to get around and get on our way and keep going. After all, it's none of my business. And it's not really my job. It's somebody else's job. Somebody else gets paid to help in situations like this. And I pay my taxes and it pays those people and they help and they get involved and I'm so glad that they do and I appreciate those people. But this isn't my situation to help or get involved or fix. This is none of my business and I'm not gonna stick my nose in something that's not my business. And so you see it and you feel nothing. And you just feel like I just need to keep going my way. But here's the truth about why I think we feel nothing. It's because oftentimes we look and we see people in need, we don't see ourselves. When we look and see somebody who's hurting or broken or in distress or in difficulty, we don't look at them and we don't see ourselves. Remember, the context of the story that Jesus is telling, the context is the greatest commandment. If you want to know what it is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your strength and all of your mind, with everything you are, it involves loving your neighbor as yourself. See, most of the time we don't see ourselves. The question that would change everything about what we see and we feel in an instance like that is this question right here. What if that were me? Imagine the next time you saw somebody Whether you think they're doing it to themselves, whether you think your help's actually gonna help or not, what if when you saw somebody who was hurting or somebody who was in distress or somebody who was in need, you saw them and what you saw when you saw them was yourself? What if you ask yourself the question, what if that were me? I'm reading into the story a bit, but I guarantee you that a bit of that is what was going on with the Samaritan, because he saw somebody who wasn't like him, who wasn't actually his neighbor, who wasn't somebody who was from among his people. He saw somebody who was from far away. He saw somebody who was actually an enemy of his people. But when he saw the man, the Samaritan that came along, when he saw the man, Jesus said he felt compassion for him. He felt compassion for him. I imagine he thought, what if that were me? What would I want somebody to do if they saw me in that same situation? And here's what you know, and here's what I know. True compassion compels us to do things that go beyond what we would normally do. Jesus said, going over to him, the Samaritan who was filled with compassion, soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine. And he bandaged his wounds, which would have been something he wouldn't have done because this was unclean. Then he put the man on his own donkey and he took him to an inn, which would have been miles away likely. He took him to an inn and he took care of him. And few in Jesus' audience his Jewish audience would have done this for a Samaritan, and none of them knew a Samaritan that would do this for any Jewish person. There was so much animosity between the two groups. So this was like unimaginable. But here's the crazy thing is Jesus isn't even done yet. He goes on, he says, the next day, to which you're, whoa, the next day, Jesus, you're assuming that we're gonna believe you, that he stayed the entire night with this Jewish man, that this Samaritan took care, stayed up all night caring for this Jewish person that was in distress. I mean, oh, Jesus. I mean, this is this story. Okay, the next day. What happened the next day? The next day, he handed the innkeeper. Wait, they shared a hotel room? I mean, like, this is just unimaginable. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time that I'm here. And in this moment, Jesus specifically places himself in a new category related to the law. He's expanding. Jesus redefines neighbor, expanding it beyond physical and ethnic borders. No longer could anyone limit, even though it was in the law in Leviticus, no longer could anyone limit neighbor to a geographic physical location or a nationality of people or just the people who were like them. And Jesus redefined that, and specifically, he redefined it in a very personal way with a very well-timed, perfectly delivered question. A question that causes all of us to examine our hearts, to examine our prejudices, to examine our biases, to examine what we assume about people who are in need. Jesus asked this question. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Not who was actually his neighbor, who should have actually taken care of, who was a neighbor? Who was the person who acted like a neighbor ought to the man who was in distress because of the bandits? Or maybe the question behind Jesus' question, because to be fair, Jesus had a question behind his question. It wasn't just which one was a neighbor to this man. His question behind the question, and maybe the more uncensored version is, he probably looked the expert of the law right in the eye and he said, so you tell me, which one of these guys loved the Lord their God with all of their heart and all of their soul and all of their strength and all of their mind by loving this person who was in need? And the answer was neither of the religious guys. Neither of the guys who instructed over and over and over the parents to instruct their kids that there's you first and foremost love the Lord their God with all their heart and soul and strength and mind. It was the one who saw the need and met it. It was the one who knew what needed to be done, and he did it. This was the one who loved God with everything that he was. Now, I don't know about you, but I look at this and I go, that's a rhetorical question. Like, this was a mic drop moment. This was like Jesus asked a question, drop the mic, walk away, and it's like he's giving everybody something to think about. But whether you think this was a good idea or not, the expert of the law decided, I think foolishly, to answer the question, which is always dangerous because he's gonna reveal something even further about himself. But he decides, no, I'm hanging on. I know I'm losing, but I'm gonna keep hanging on. And wait, Jesus, I didn't get to interject before, and that was really tricky. But here's my answer to the question. My answer is the one who showed him mercy. To which Jesus went, exactly. It's exactly what I thought you would say. And that further reveals your bias and your prejudice. Wait a minute, Jesus is going, no, which one specifically? He's like, the one who showed mercy on him. And Jesus said, okay, so not the priest and not the Levite, it was and the guy's like, it was the one who showed mercy on him. I can't even bear to say it, Jesus. I mean, are you kidding me? What's your point in this whole story? He couldn't bear to acknowledge that somebody he saw as much lesser than him actually had a faith, had a love for God that raised above somebody who was one of the religious leaders. But Jesus, even after him acknowledging and showing his own personal prejudice and bias, Jesus said, yeah, that's right. Now, you go and do the same thing. Be the Samaritan. This is Jesus' punchline. Don't be the priest. Don't be the Levite. Be the Samaritan. And the crowd went wild, like massive applause. Brilliant story, Jesus. So amazing. Could you tell us another one? No. They were stunned. At this moment, Jesus, he didn't set himself against Moses. He expanded the law of Moses. It was inclusive of the law of Moses. This was why Jesus was the brilliant master teacher. Jesus does something to help us realize that in the beginning, God was accommodating to our ability in the way any good father does, the way we do to our kids. He was accommodating, saying, you should love the people right around you who are like you. You should take care of the people that are among you. And now Jesus is coming, he's going, you know what, I'm gonna expand that. I'm actually gonna raise the bar. God's come to say that all people are valuable to him. And he wants you to love people the way he loves people. Jesus cuts through all the debates. He pulls back the curtain on what's most important. Here's what Jesus says. He says, look, this is what you need to understand. Your heart for God is revealed by your heart for your neighbors. Who is my neighbor? Anyone who's right around you, who's in need. That's who I want you to be a neighbor to. See, God measures our love for him by how we treat those who are in need, who are right around us, who are right next to us. Not by our willingness to jump on a plane and go halfway around the world and go on a mission trip. That's an amazing thing. Not by our once a year, our ability to go support some people or an initiative to get involved in something that helps feed or bring clean water. Those are amazing things. Those are things we should do. I don't point a finger at any of those things. But that wasn't the point of Jesus' story. The point of Jesus' story was that the real-time barometer of our love for God is how we respond when we see those people who are in need, who are right around us. How we feel, and then how we move toward them or not move toward them. So what does that look like practically? Here's what I would say. Here's simply what the Good Samaritan did. He saw a need and met it. This is not complicated. We overcomplicate what it is to be a Good Samaritan. This is really simple. Jesus is cutting through all of the debates and all of the fog. He's making it really clear. Who's the person? Who's the neighbor? Somebody who saw a need and met it. Someone who knew the price and chose to pay it anyway. And somebody who maybe this is the most important one for us in the 21st century in this part of the country, who decided not to talk himself out of what he knew he should do. Somebody who saw a need and met it, who knew the price and paid it, and didn't talk himself out of it, who didn't make an excuse, who didn't go, it's somebody else's job, or I'm too busy, or it's not for me, or I'm not an expert, or I don't know how to help this person specifically. It's somebody who just saw a need and they met it. Now, here's an extraordinary thing. I'm gonna talk about, I'm gonna give you a little bit of homework, because this one needs homework, by the way. I'll just say that. We all need homework because we're not great at this. Like we're people who, in our world, we just think it's somebody else, it's somebody else's job. We pay people to do that. Whatever that is, we just gloss over those things. And so I'm gonna talk about personal application in a second, but we have a really easy way that all of us collectively can do this together. Last year, we did a backpack drive, as some of you know, and we didn't even, without trying too hard, we actually collected last year 172 backpacks for kids at a Title I school that weren't gonna have backpacks otherwise. And so you've heard about this the last couple of weeks. We've kind of been talking about it a little bit today, last couple of weeks and today. But here's the thing. We decided after meeting the need of that school, and again, they have a whole new crop of kids that are going in there this year that need backpacks and supplies for school that wouldn't have them otherwise. We decided we were just gonna ask our other partners. It seemed like we could do 172 pretty easily last year. So we went to DCS, in addition to Concordia School, which is the school that we helped last year. We went to DCS, which we work with through Mission Foster, to Open Arms, the food pantry that we bring food for on a monthly basis. House of Refuge, who helps people in transitional poverty down the road. Sunshine Acres, Helen's Hope Chest, Jose's Closet. These are all organizations we work with and help people who are in need in our community. We said, hey, how many kids associated with the families that you serve won't have the supplies they need when they go back to school this next year? And would it be helpful if we supplied a backpack and some supplies for them? And so they all gave us back specific numbers. This isn't like, oh yeah, we could use about X amount. They came back with specific numbers, and if you total all those numbers up, the need for these organizations who are right around us that we work with all the time is 486. 486 backpacks. To which I thought, well, that's a lot more than we did last year, but we didn't make any promises. I just said, you know what? Let me just present the need. We're gonna talk about this very thing in a few weeks. And this was, again, they were not even, this is, I don't wanna say it's a God thing because people like all the time, but I don't know how else to say it. Like I was planning this message, the other team was planning the backpack, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what we're gonna talk about. This is a need that's right around us. And by the way, if somebody were to do this for your kid, if your kid was the kid that was in need for a backpack, how would you feel? Isn't it true when people love on your kids, you feel what? You feel loved. Isn't that what it is to love your neighbor as yourself? This is 86 kids who this next fall are gonna start school. And they may or may not have the supplies they need to start school. And I'll just tell you, I think every kid should have the opportunity and the supplies they need for education. So, it's my challenge. I don't know how we'll do. In fact, I said this the last service, and maybe I laid it on too thick, but I said this last service, I don't know how we'll do. So here's what we did. We have 486. We decided we were gonna buy all the backpacks, and you could buy all the supplies. We bought the backpacks with the money you generously have already given to LoveWorks. We have a pool of money in LoveWorks that only helps people outside of our church. It helps our LoveWorks partners. And in that pool, we bought 600 backpacks to give out, hoping that we give out over the course of the weekend, we'd be able to give out most of those backpacks, and maybe we could reach the 486 backpacks. Here's the problem. We gave out all the backpacks at the 9 o'clock service this morning. Literally every single one of them was taken. Isn't that awesome? So cool. So some of you are like, so we don't have to do anything, right? Like we're off the hook. No, our team's actually calling other nonprofits and other Title I schools in our area, people who are right around us going, hey, we have a church that's generous and they're excited about backpacks. Do you need any backpacks? Because we want to supply backpacks for as many kids as we can who are not gonna have a backpack and supplies this fall. So here's what we're gonna do. I don't have any backpacks to give you. I thought I was gonna give you a backpack on your way out today, but they're all gone. So if you need a backpack, you can come back next week and pick one up, or actually there are stores that sell backpacks. You could just go get one and fill it up with stuff. You're gonna get a card on your way out today that has this stuff on it. It's also on our websites and social media. If you wanna participate with us, we actually are buying more backpacks that we're gonna have available next week. But I would love for us to love people in our community. Again, love the people who are right around us in this very tangible way. And I would love it if you would, and you do as many as you want. we're gonna find, and we will be responsible. We'll find legitimate homes for all of these backpacks for every kid. If we have to go outside the Phoenix metro area, we will. And we'll find a place for all these backpacks for a kid who needs one this fall. So here's the thing, that's collective. We're all gonna be excited about it, we're gonna do that. Here's the personal one. This is harder. When we were talking earlier about seeing people in need who are right around us, my guess is for most of you, something came to mind. It's a need of somebody who's right around you, and you've seen it. You've seen it multiple times. And you've made excuses as to why you shouldn't get involved. I'm not an expert, I don't know how to point them in the right direction. Maybe it was somebody whose marriage was in crisis in the cubicle next to you. Maybe it was somebody who's dealing with some financial trouble and you don't have a bunch of extra money. Maybe it was somebody you have a hint, or maybe you have a pretty good view into the fact that they're dealing with some sort of substance abuse or depression or anxiety, and you've seen it. And maybe even a little bit of it, and you've felt something, felt like you ought to do something. You've seen what's going on. You know it's got a price associated with it. You may not know exactly where to point them. You may have to, find out through the church what resources are available in the community, through Celebrate Recovery, maybe through pulling some other people together to go, hey, I can't meet these people's financial needs, but could we together help them? Could we get involved? See, here's what I think the key to action is in all those situations. It's the question. The question we all should ask ourselves from time to time. What if that were me? And what if that was my family? What if that was my marriage? What if that was my child? What if that were me? What would I want somebody to do for me? That is what it is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I'm not telling you what you should do. I'm not telling you what you have to do. But Jesus' question was clear. And it cuts through all of our excuses. He says, which one of these three was a neighbor to the man who was in need? And I want you to read it with me. Which one? It was the one who, saw a need and met it. You can do better than that. It was the one who knew the price and paid it. It was the one who didn't talk himself out of it. Which one of these was the one who loved the Lord his God with all of his heart and with all of his soul and all of his strength and all of his mind? Come on. It was the one who saw a need and met it. It was the one who knew the price and paid it. And it was the one who didn't talk himself out of it. Jesus said, it's right. Now, you go and do the same. What gave him the right? What gave him the authority? I'll tell you. Because when Jesus saw us in need and he knew the price that was really high, it would cost him his life, he saw our need and he met it. He knew the price and he willingly paid it. And even though in a moment of weakness in the garden, showing his humanity, he asked his Father, is there any other way? He didn't talk himself out of it. He didn't sidestep it. He met our need and he paid our price so that you and I would understand the perfect love of a heavenly Father. So, Jesus says, go and do the same. Love others so that they know my love, and in doing so, you express your love for me. Let me pray for you. God, I pray today for somebody who's here who's never recognized or felt that true love of a perfect heavenly Father, who sees every one of us, saw every one of us in our distress, sees us in our difficulties, saw us in our situation where because of the penalty of sin, the death and separation from the eternity that God wanted and desired for us to experience, the eternal life, the true life, the fullness of thriving life that he designed for us to experience, we were gonna miss out on it. He saw us in our distress and he moved toward us. And when he saw us, he felt compassion on us. And he equally saw the price that it would take to pay for that debt. And even though it was high, he chose to do it on our behalf. God, I pray that we would be people today that would be moved by that. We'd be people that would not only be moved to help kids in our community that deserve the resources necessary to get the best education possible, but we'd be moved as we run into neighbors and coworkers and friends and parents of our kids' sports teams' friends and our social circles, and that when we see needs in our community, that we would express our love for you by expressing a love for people as we recognize the fact that we're no different. And what if that were us? And when it was us, you did the very same thing for us. So I pray that we would be moved to show your love to people around us, right around us, validating our love for you by the way we love them. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, thanks so much for being here with us today on Father's Day. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll see you next Sunday right back here in Mission.